Every few years, something comes along that changes the rules of cybersecurity entirely. Not just a new tool or a new threat, the actual rules of society that determine how we exist with one another. The phone changed how we communicate. The internet changed where we live. The cloud changed where we store everything we care about. And now we are in the middle of another one of those shifts. The difference this time is that the thing changing the rules is also inside the room with us. Artificial intelligence is not just a tool that the everyday person is using. It is also a tool that our adversaries, think your attackers, these hackers, are also using. And it's learning, adapting, and moving faster than most of us are ready to admit. So that's what I've been spending majority of my time doing, reading, learning, and getting hands-on with the technology that is designed to impact our lives. Hey, friend, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Dominique, aka your favorite cybersecurity homegirl. This channel is for anyone who wants to better learn, understand, and join the cybersecurity and compliance industries. My goal for each of my videos is to teach you what is exactly happening in this industry, give you the tools you need to lead with clarity, and help you build a career that you are proud of, that you can thrive in. If that's you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Let's get into it. Today, we are starting a new series. I am going to be doing a chapter by chapter breakdown of the AI Cybersecurity Handbook by Caroline Wong. Now, let me start off by saying this is not a sponsored poster video. I bought this with my own moolah. I was genuinely curious about what it entails. I also love reading. Caroline is an amazing colleague in the cybersecurity industry who is doing amazing work, and I'm a girl's girl. So, of course, I supported. You could buy it wherever you could buy books. And again, it's a win win for me because I really enjoy reading books. I know that's not a normal thing right now, but yeah, I do. So for the next few weeks, I want to go chapter by chapter. Today, we're going to start with chapter one, which is about the age of adapted adversaries, aka AI's impact on the security balance of power. Now, I'm going to do these videos kind of book report style, which means I'm going to have the book open. I have some passages that I'm going to go through and read from. I'm going to share my notes and reactions, and then I'm going to connect what I'm reading from this book to what it actually means for practitioners in your everyday work environment. Now, these videos are going to be great if you are a security professional, a GRC professional, or you're new in general. If you've been hearing about AI everywhere, but still feel like you're trying to catch up, or how does this impact my day to day, especially if you're a newbie who's trying to understand, like, how is AI impacting the workspace? And because you're not in the workspace, you're like, how am I supposed to connect the dots and interview with that? That's what these videos are going to be about. Now, if you're someone who knows the technical side, but you're trying to figure out how does this help me govern, audit, manage risk, this is especially going to be good for you. The reason why I'm doing this is because we as leaders, practitioners, heck, the everyday person cannot continue to wait until the government or until AI governance is mature, right? We have to start learning beforehand. And so that's a big reason why I'm even going through a lot of these series while I'm doing a lot of these books and these readings, is because we don't have regulation right now for AI, right? The guardrails are still being created. And so you get to be a participant in creating those guardrails. I also think that's a really great opportunity to help showcase your experience for those who are looking for work, right? We know how crazy the market is at the moment. And so using opportunities like reading books or getting certifications or just in general immersing yourself in this technology will just help you overall in the long run. So I'm a big advocate of getting your hands into the game. And the frameworks that we usually look for, so think NIST, NIST, right, which is a governance body that writes a ton of frameworks for the cybersecurity industry. If I'm not mistaken, they do all types of industries, but for cybersecurity in particular, they usually set the baseline for what good security practices look like. And so those regulations aren't coming out until maybe end of 2026, beginning of 2027, the earliest. And in the meanwhile, right, I know there are a lot of people who are being forced into having to implement AI or showcase how it's improving, how it's creating efficiency, all those good business jargon words. And so I firmly believe that the people who are going to lead in this space are the ones who are learning out loud right now, asking questions, building their mental model of what this technology is, and perhaps also building a foundation in the discipline they're interested in, because AI is impacting everything, right? It's not just cybersecurity, it's healthcare, right? It's the car industry, it's literally every aspect of our world. And so that's what this series is about, me learning out loud and doing my favorite pastime, which is yapping and reading. Okay, so I want to start with something the author writes pretty early in chapter 1. And again, I'm a book I'm going to read to you all. And she describes how each wave of technology draws us closer, right? And how, like I said, the phone carried our voice, the internet carries our words, the cloud carried our data, and now AI is carrying something that I think is so much harder to hand off, which is our judgment. And so here is a very perfect quote. Caroline says that artificial intelligence now carries our judgment across the boundary between humans and machines. And the reason why that phrase or sentence stuck out to me so much is because, as we all know, our judgment isn't perfect, right? We have biases, we make decisions with incomplete information. Each of us have a very unique background that informed why we would choose certain decisions over the other, right? And we also operate inside of systems and organizations that have their own agendas, their own blind spots. So when we build artificial intelligence that carries our judgment, we are also building artificial intelligence that carries all of that around, like the biases, the incompleteness, the indecisiveness, right? And so that's not a reason to be afraid of it, but it is a reason to be thoughtful about how we govern, how we participate. But I'm going to come back to that. Okay, this next part of the first chapter is about risk and trust, right? Which are two things that Caroline highlights that are always changing. And so there's another paragraph I'm going to read out loud to kind of set the tone for risk and trust. And so each shift has redrawn the boundaries of risk and trust. Each has forced defenders to rethink what it means to secure something that's constantly changing shape. But none have changed the tempo of conflict quite like AI. What once unfolded over days or months now happens in milliseconds. And decisions that once required analysts and operators are now made by algorithms operating at speeds and scales that challenge traditional oversight. Now, something else that just hit me when I think about that again is, decisions that once required analysts and operators that are now made by algorithms. And that word algorithms made me think of like how I view Instagram. I was on Instagram early, right? Like 2012 and the Twitter before it was X. And over time, I have been able to witness algorithms and the evolution of them, how they affect how I see my friends, and not in terms of like how I view them as friends. It's just whether or not they even show up on my timeline. It affects, if I interact with things too much, right? It's taking all these data points and informing what I can see, what I can view, what I interact with. And at this point, now that I've been on social media for quite some time, I'm so particular about what shows up on my feed because we all know that it can show all kinds of hateful things. I always joke that my partner and I are on different sides of the internet, right, based off of what we can see. And so if we're aware that algorithms can change things like our Instagram feeds, and you're careful about that, I think it's also to be mindful that these same algorithms now are embedded in a lot of these AI systems, right? It's the engine behind it. And so we want to be careful about what the information that is being put in front of you from AI, the same way that we would do perhaps with Instagram. Okay, now what I want you to hold on from this particular section is this. Trust is not just something that exists between people, right? It exists between people and systems. It exists between people and institutions, and increasingly between people and machines. And so, every major technological shift that has forced us to rethink who and what we trust and on what basis. AI is doing that just the same. And for security and compliance professionals, this is not just a philosophical point, right? This is the entire job. Our job is to move along with the trends and shifts, no matter if we kind of agree with them or not. Next in the chapter is describing how the battlefield is two sided, right? And the author is clear that AI is not just a defender's tool, right? It's not just for us who are trying to protect systems and people. It is being used offensively. And it has shifted the attack surface in two very specific ways that I want to make sure we're talking about. And that is speed and scale. So let's do speed first. The book talks about decisions that once required days or months of human analysis now happen in milliseconds, right? Think about what that means for our detection and response workflows. And detection and response workflows is being able to detect if an event, right, like an intruder, somebody coming into your system, someone hacking, has happened. And response is, okay, now that you know someone, for example, is at your front door trying to break in, how do you respond, right? Calling the police, taking care of it yourself, etc. Don't recommend that. Um, think about how we built our security and compliance programs, right? Around a timeline, right? We expect that it'll take days to respond, or it'll take days for this investigation or for this attack to happen. But now attackers are working at, they're not working at human speed anymore. That timeline is gone. Now, our second theme is scale. AI powered attacks are not targeting people in the traditional sense, meaning you're not looking out for those really weird emails anymore where someone said they can send you $1 million, or you're looking out for incorrect or spelling that is off, right? AI attacks now are very personal. They can scale the globe in seconds. They can target you, right? If you have publicly available information, and that could be anything. That could be you on LinkedIn, that can be you on Instagram. You can just type in your name now, right? And all of your social profiles might pop up. Based off of things that you've said, attackers can say, hey, I see that this person really likes Hello Kitty. And so I'm going to send something that is tailored to you, that can get you to click on something way easier than perhaps they could before. And the book describes how bots are mapping out their targets in seconds. So imagine being able to target a billion people in a couple of minutes. Isn't that nuts? Now, there is something called polymorphic malware code, right? And that is a term that describes how code, those things online that people, software developers, create, that kind of code designed to attack can change the way it looks every time it sends. Meaning, if I'm a defender, right, and I see you attack me, you come through the front door. And I'm like, okay, cool. The next time you try to break into here, you're going to come through the front door again. I'm going to be ready for it. But this time you come through the window. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, now I got to do the window and the door. Okay, cool. And then the next time you come through the back door. And I'm like, now that's three things I have to, right? You see how it kind of piles on. Imagine polymorphic being able to do that at scale, meaning it can change 1,000 times a second, a million times a second, right? And so each time a defender is like, man, I have figured out how this attacker is getting in, they done changed it and are way down the block before we realize what has happened to us. So what that means is that the attack surface is not just bigger, it's smarter, right? About finding out where you are exposed or where organizations are exposed. And then there is the defense side, because this isn't a one side story, right? It's not doom and gloom where attackers are just able to get all of our stuff and our money. For defenders, AI is foresight, right? It gives security teams the ability to anticipate threats, connect dots that previously we might have missed because we're human and we can't catch everything. And therefore, we can respond faster to events than ever before possible, which is really, really cool. And so the book makes the point that AI gives defenders something they didn't always have, which was time. It always felt like you were racing against time. When you're getting into computer science, something you might often hear from your teachers, or if not, let me be the first to say, is that the average time, and this is way back when, so I don't know if that time has changed now, but the average time by the time you connect like a brand new computer to the internet, you had maybe 30 seconds, right, before malware, before something bad could happen should you not have any security protections on it. 30 seconds is nuts. Like that always got me. And so imagine now where you have things moving at such scale is probably like zero. All right. And the central idea that the author lands on, and this is one I want you to write down, and I'm going to read again. And so we arrive at the central idea of this book. AI is both sword and shield. It magnifies human potential on both sides of the fight. True resilience doesn't come from choosing one side or the other, it comes from mastering both. Now, I've been in the cyber and governance industry long enough to see multiple waves of this technology is changing everything that we do, right? And I have found that the people who stay relevant, who lead, who get invited into the rooms that matter are not necessarily the ones who predicted the change first, but they're often the ones who moved with it, right? Who learned, who didn't get stuck, who built their understanding even when it's uncomfortable, because this isn't easy to do. Even when it disrupted like everything you have built your expertise around, like 14 years of being in this industry, just for someone else to come along and kind of try to undo that. And I know that that is what that AI moment is right now and what it feels like right now. So you don't have to agree with every application or the direction, but you do not have to think, and you also don't have to think every case is ethical. But I definitely think you do have to understand it, because understanding is the prerequisite for governing, right? Is the prerequisite for setting up the rules and the guardrails. And governing is what we're meant to do, and we can aid in. Now, chapter one also has a section called a shared language, basic terms and concepts. And I appreciate this section that Caroline took the time to put this together, because one of the biggest barriers to having real conversations about AI and security and governance is that we're not all using the same vocabulary and language. And that's very difficult to have a conversation with someone if you ain't speaking the same language, right? We got to be able to use the same terms. I can't use some bigger term. You don't know what it means. We got to be able to meet people in the middle. So I'm going to walk through the terms the author defines, because this is the kind of foundational knowledge that your entire mental model around artificial intelligence sits on top of. So please open your laptop, grab some pen and paper, write this down, pause this video. Okay, so the first one that we're going to talk about is defined as artificial intelligence, AI. This is defined as systems. Damn, that playing loud. I don't know if y'all can hear that. Anyway, AI is defined as systems that perform tasks associated with human cognition. So think perception, pattern recognition, decision making, and learning. And so here's the key part. AI is not a single technology, which I think confuses a lot of people. It is actually a whole ecosystem of models and data and feedback loops. And that matters because a lot of AI, the risk conversation with AI, treat it as a single entity, but it is not, right? Like you have to know each part of the ecosystem so you know how to address each threat differently. Next is machine learning, which is a subset of AI. It is the set of methods that improve model behavior by finding patterns in data rather than hard coding rules. So if you're maybe familiar in technology, a lot of the times when it comes to automation, There are rules hard coded to find the patterns. But this time, you don't have to hard code what in the world data, because machine learning can find patterns on its own, or recognize it on its own. The key thing that the author highlights here is failure models. Machine learning makes defenses adaptive, meaning it can change and be flexible, but it also introduces new ways that things can go wrong, right? And so that's thinking about your inputs, context, or your incentives might shift. Large language models, also known as LLMs, are neural networks trained on large amounts of text and code. They can generate fluent language, complete tasks, and scale social engineering in ways we haven't seen before. And so the author flags this for both capabilities and risk, right? LLMs can accelerate content generation, right? Review and triage things, but can also scale social engineering, AKA the bad stuff. Okay, we only have a few more. Next is going to be something called MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol. And it's something I've written about on LinkedIn before, where I have a newsletter, cybersecurity newsletter that I publish just about weekly. And I give good context on all types of things happening in the industry. And so I was glad to see it here included in the book, right? It is an emerging interoperability layer. Think of it as the standardized way to connect AI applications with external tools, right? Or data sources or your workflows, things that live outside of the platform that you're, or the AI that you're using. And so the security implication is that every connection point is a potential attack surface and a governance responsibility. And so what that means is, if you think about Claude, a lot of people use Claude, and you connect that with your Gmail, with your um, social media platform, you connect it to your bank, right? Every time you connect your Claude to something externally, you have to be careful about the risk that happens there. Because say somebody gets into your Claude account, or somebody is able to get into one of your other connection points, they might be able to hop around to all the other ones, right? And so we want to be mindful about how you are connecting your ecosystem within artificial intelligence. Next, we're going to talk about AI pipelines. And so this is the full system, right? When we think about a pipeline, we're thinking about the end-to-end workflow of something. And so this includes, for AI, this includes data collection, pre-processing, inference, post-processing, output, moderation. And the author makes a point that I want to emphasize. And like I just said before, each hop in that pipeline is a dependency and a potential failure point. And so when you are assessing AI risks, we're not just assessing the model, you're assessing an entire system. Okay, last two. Prompts and prompt injection get their own entry, as they should. So prompt injection is when an attacker crafts inputs. And so think, every time you type into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, right? That's an input. And so an attacker can craft an input or a phrase or a sentence or a long paragraph directly or through external content to override that model's instructions. And so another way to put it is that, Claude, Anthropic, excuse me, the company has guardrails around Claude, how you use it, how you interact it, what kind of questions you can ask it, what kind of outputs that it should give you. What it didn't anticipate is what happens when somebody decides to try to abuse that and tries to break it or confuse it to see if they can get a not so nice result, right? And so this is now a top tracked security concern, because they haven't put a lot of thought or emphasis or guardrails around prompt injection. And you have to remember, if you can do prompt injection attacks at scale, we talked about scale earlier in this video. If I can do 1,000,000, if I'm not mistaken, an article actually came out where they were actually entering in 1,000,000 inputs into Claude an hour, like not an hour, a minute, right? And so imagine getting hit bombarded so many times by something a million. Imagine a million phone calls coming in at once. Imagine a million text messages coming in at once, right? Your phone would crash out. That is exactly what they're trying to do with Claude so they can extract any information or do what they want. And our last definition is going to be model drift, which describes a performance degradation that occurs over time as the underlying data distributions or the relationship between inputs and outputs shift. Now, what that means is, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I definitely have, is a little bit about when you are entering into Claude over and over again and you have a long conversation. Sometimes the outputs or the memory of that conversation can get a little wonky. And so I find myself having to correct, or I personally ask for validation each time. And I go and check it myself because I've learned now that you can't trust 100% what you get back from these chatbots. And so I have to do my own due diligence. Otherwise, the work and quality that I'm putting out is going to go down. And that's not something I'm willing to compromise on. And so imagine now apply that same concept to an organization. You are relying on this for really important decision making or really important actions, and that model gets things wrong over time. That's hard to course correct, and that's a governance issue, right? It's not enough to just evaluate the model once you deploy it and put it out in the public, right? You have to monitor it over time. Okay, let's cover something in chapter 1 that I found most useful for GRC practitioners, and that is the reinterpretation of the foundational security principles through an AI lens. And here's the thing that Caroline or the author wants you to walk away with, that the foundation of good security has not changed. The mission hasn't changed, and the principles are still the same. It's just that the terrain is new. I thought that was so simple but so profound because, especially when I was first trying to get into AI or learn about it, I kept thinking like, man, I had to ignore the foundational principles that I built my entire career on. And then fortunately, very quickly, I learned that's not the case, right? AI, similar to when cloud computing came around, is just a layer on top of cybersecurity versus a replacement. And I think that's how people are thinking about it right now, which makes sense because AI is in the news. It is being showcased that AI is replacing a lot of things. And it is a matter of time before people catch up and realize it's not a replacement, it's a tool. And so in this case, the CIA Triad still applies in the age of artificial intelligence. Now, the CIA Triad stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It is the holy grail of cybersecurity. Quite literally, if you're, especially if you're new to the industry, all you're always going to be asked, like no matter what certification, no matter what exam, no matter what video you're learning, it is always going to ask you about the CIA triad. And let me break it down for what that means. When it comes to AI, confidentiality now means protecting training data or model weights, inference APIs, and the data that shapes how a model behaves. These are all terminologies that are part of our artificial intelligence, but is now the sits in the subsection of the confidentiality part of the CIA triad. Integrity means ensuring that when your artificial intelligence learns and how it behaves, that should not be tampered with, right? And so things like data poisoning or model tampering, manipulation are things that companies, organizations need to be mindful of when it comes to deploying AI. And availability still means reliability under stress, right? If you are in the industry, you know that availability or having uptime, that 99.999% quota that every organization basically reports, right, is something super important because if your platform goes down, the internet goes down, you're losing customers, you're losing trust, and you're losing money. So availability, at least when it comes to artificial intelligence, just means you have to be mindful of model overload, right? Something called graceful fallback and preventing runaway automation. Now, I wrote something in the, if I can take my sticky note off, and the margins here that these are questions that security teams, governance teams should be asking together. Normally, we're pretty siloed, right? Governance is on one side, GRC is on one side, security is on another. But more and more, I'm definitely thinking that the foundation you need to have to really be successful when it comes to artificial intelligence, at least, is a solid foundation in both. That's going to take some time, so give yourself some grace with it. But it's no longer just about a technical review, right? It's compliance conversations, governance conversations that are now coming into question and are the priority for leaders, right? It's a risk conversation. And if you're AI vendor assessment, which is something organizations use when they're working with a third party. If you're not asking questions about the artificial intelligence, because everybody has an AI power tool now, right? And so AI conversations are non-negotiable. And they should be about data integrity, model governance, inference security. Like, you need to be asking the details about all of these things. Another term in cybersecurity that still applies here, including the CIA Triad, is defense in depth, right? Or you'll see it kind of spelled out DID. This still applies, but the layers look different, right? And defense in depth means that think about your home, where typically for a protection system, not only do you have a door, but that door has a lock on it. It might have several locks on it. You might also have a camera system or an alarm system, right? You might have that hooked up to police the minute it triggers. And so those are layers of protection for your home. Think about that the same way for organizations, right? They have layers of protection to protect their assets, their people, their intellectual property. And so, as we all know, it is not, or at least now you do, it is not just about perimeter defense, which means I'm just caring about the outside of my home, right? Like I'm just caring about the door, I'm just caring about the windows. Now you have to care about what's inside, right? And so do organizations where I'm having to care about monitoring and deployment, my data pipeline security. I have to make sure human oversight is part of the equation here, because as much as when the news will make you think that humans are part of this revolution, and let me be the first to tell you that they are. And the author makes the point that the defense in depth in AI systems is about preventing things from going wrong, right? Or preventing runaway automation instead of a catastrophe, right? And it's not just inconvenient. The last two security concepts that she mentions that is still part of the AI revolution, or that you should use as part of maybe your toolkit for addressing AI, is called threat modeling for the machine age. And this one is about asking the right questions, right? About what are we protecting? Who might want to attack us? How might they succeed, right? And so remember, I talked about you have a front door, you have a back door, you have a window. Like those are all points that an attacker can get in. And it's also wondering about what are the new assets, right? Your data, the models, prompts, pipelines. Remember, I said that whole entire ecosystem, and understanding who are the new adversaries. Before, we used to just care about like bored kids in the basement who figured out how to do something quirky on the internet. And now we have true nation states. We have real I was about to call them like the mafia. It's not like the mafia stuff, but we have people out there who just want to do bad things, right? And so threat modeling is taking all of that into consideration, and that needs to evolve when it comes to AI. And the last thing she mentions is something called a flight data recorder, which, if you're not familiar, like in aviation, there's something called a black box in planes, so that if something happens, they are able to capture and investigate, right? And having that kind of same mindset for incident response. And I really enjoy that framing because when something goes wrong in an AI system, you need to be able to trace back the story back to its source. And so logging, monitoring, and observability are not optional. They weren't optional before, especially if you're in the cloud by now, but it definitely has to shift to be able to properly monitor or alert on AI activity. And so you should know what data did the model use, who changed access, what outputs did it produce, what prompt trigger, what was, you need to know all of that, right? You need to be asking those questions, or you need to be figuring out how you go get those answers. Okay, the author connects AI governance directly to the foundations of effective cybersecurity governance, right? And so think visibility, accountability, inventory. And she named something that I want us to sit with for a second is that you cannot protect what you don't know you have, right? Every organization needs a current, accurate inventory of its AI systems, which is one of the biggest problems. Like a lot of the research I have done around AI and its impact on organizations or businesses right now has just been that people don't even know what's being used in the organization, right? It's so easy for you to connect AI to your everyday personal accounts or your business accounts or organization or your products are embedding AI regardless if you approve them or not, right? And so visibility is a top challenge for leaders right now. I don't expect that to be answered right away. That it's going to take some time, but it is good to start there and have that in your mind if you are a leader in the field, so that way you can start to get a handle on it before it gets crazier down the line. And so it's not just worrying about what was deployed, it's what is in use, right? What data does it touch? Who built it in the first place? Who's accountable for it? Because if you remember in one of my previous videos about AI's impact on cybersecurity, accountability is an issue. Okay. No one wants to fully own the success or failure of AI right now. Of course, everybody wants the success for it, but in order to be successful, you got to try. Sometimes you got to fail. And people are just not willing to take that risk. And so they're ignoring it. And so without that inventory, governance is impossible. It's like, it's not, it's impossibly hard. It just gets really, really hard. And so she also talks about access and data governance in terms that security professionals should recognize, right? Every model, every surface you connect to expands your risk footprint, right? We always talk about the attack surface. Your attack surface increases every time you connect Claude to a new tool. And trust can't be default anymore, right? We used to trust things. We used to say, okay, I'm going to plug you in. I don't really care. I'm not going to read these terms and conditions. I'm not going to understand what's happening on the inside, which is fine. But you have to remember that every connection point requires governance. Every connection point is a way that attackers can come inside your systems or organizations. Okay, this next section is about human in the loop, which is something I want to sit on because I think this is a conversation I feel needs to have pretty honestly. Honestly, all these businesses need to have out here because the research is showing us, right, that getting rid of the very people who helped build this, who built this society, who built this world, right, we're not expendable. And so the author frames human in the loop not as a limitation on artificial intelligence efficiency or return on investment that you hear in the news, right? But it is the very mechanism that keeps automation aligned with human values. It is the reason why we'll be able to make better decisions quicker, right? And the question is not whether to include humans. The question is, how do we balance speed and accountability? And how do we keep autonomy from becoming reckless? Because that's what's happening, right? We know we have laws in our society because if we didn't, people would go around acting a goddamn fool. And so, same with automation in these machines. We have governance, we have rules so that these machines ain't acting a goddamn fool, right? And so, questions that the author poses is this safe, right? Who's responsible? Does this make sense for us in our organization or for me as a human being? Is this fair? Right. And that last one isn't a technical question. It's a governance, it's an ethical question. And governance is ours. It's you and me. Okay, so the final concept I want to highlight from chapter one is explainability because it connects directly to how I think about this work and why it matters for the people watching this. So, explainability is about how we turn automation into assurance, right? And assurance is me being sure, me being confident in this decision making, this process, this workflow. And you get that by having the ability to trace, reason, verify, question, understand why a system did something. And the author calls for explainability and transparency as the next standard of cyber maturity. Not a nice to have, right? It is a foundational it is a foundational expectation that explainability is part of how we interact with one another, how you act as an organization, as a product, as a person. And I wrote something that we writing in my books in the margin here, and the connection between explainability and the accountability gap in AI governance is something that I have been developing for an article. Because when you have opaque or really vague algorithms, again, we talked about algorithms earlier in reference to Instagram, they just don't erode trust and confidence in technology, right? They erode trust in the organizations that deploy them. And for those of us in security and governance, like trust is a big part of the job, right? I have to get on calls with customers to explain how we take security seriously here. And a part of doing that or having that conversation is I'm building trust with them. And so if I can't give you answers or if organizations can't answer that, it's really hard for customers, people, partners to trust us, right? Okay, we're coming to the end of chapter one. So let me give you three things that you can do today, this week, you or your team, in order to make sure that you understand AI's impact on the security balance and power. And so the first is take the CIA Triad. So that's confidentiality, integrity, availability, and go apply it, right, to one of the AI systems that you have deployed at your company or in your personal life, right? And I don't want you to do a product evaluation. Think about confidentiality. Confidentiality is making sure that something I care about is safe. And so we here in organizations, they care about intellectual property, people, technology, people, processes, and technology. And so it's a question about risk. Is the training data protected? You know, the models that you're using, is integrity being monitored? Do you have a fallback, right? If your system fails or behaves unexpectedly. And if you're using a software product, meaning you don't own the AI, you don't own the LLM, you don't own those foundational pieces of your AI ecosystem, they should have some documentation publicly available for you. And if they don't, that gives you your answer right there. Because you can go on Anthropic and see about their models. Matter of fact, that CEO of his often talks about the gaps that they have, right? And I think it's very information and very telling when an organization is transparency. And so go write down what you find, and notice where some gaps are. Second, add prompt injection to your vendor AI risk questions. Your third party vendor, whoever, when you're doing assessments on them, you know, you need to understand how they're governing prompts, right? Especially if you're relying on them for their security, right? You need to understand how they test for prompt injection vulnerabilities and whether or not they have controls around external content that might influence model behavior. So a lot of companies are not understanding the AI models can change. Their behavior can change, they can do whatever, and they usually default to some of the not so very nice things that we don't want to happen. Lastly, start figuring out how to build an AI inventory. And you can do this both in your personal life and in your professional life. In your professional life, that will look something like, hey, how many people are using AI powered, AI embedded products? Or do we have a visibility into all of them? And if not, how can you go start to talk to some of those teams to ask that question? You can start talking to your marketing team. You can start talking to your product team, engineering. I know they got a lot over there. You should go over there because you need to ask engineering what they got. In your personal life, you can also do this by asking yourself, like, you could say, am I using all the chatbots? Like, do I got ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude? That's three. Am I using Google products that also have AI embedded? Am I using other products that have AI embedded? Is my phone, it has products AI embedded, right? Like all of that helps you build your own inventory. Okay, let's start to wrap this up. So, Caroline, my girl, is building towards something with this book that I think is exactly right. I'm super excited. I got all of my little sticky notes here. I'm super excited to go through the rest of this book because the technical landscape is changing, right? But the responsibility, the human responsibility, is not. A lot of people are just ignoring it. And the mission of good security, if you want to be a security professional, especially someone who gets their CISSP, which is a very commonly like highly regarded certification. Like one of the rules of even being a security professional, right, is that you are taking it seriously, you have integrity, and that you are striving towards good security and a good security and positive culture, right? And so the mission of good security has always been to keep systems secure and human values intact. AI does not change that mission, it intensifies it. So before I sign off, I want to read one of my favorite paragraphs. It's a little bit of a long one at the end. And I think it really speaks to, I think it just really puts chapter one together. And so give me 2 seconds. Boom, boom, boom. But like every tool before it, AI mirrors intent. Fire can illuminate or destroy. Code can empower or exploit. Intelligence, natural or artificial, can be guided towards resilience or ruin. The goal isn't to outthink machines, but to learn to work with them, to build feedback loops where human judgment shapes machine precision. Used well, AI doesn't replace human thinking, it amplifies it. It turns data into foresight and foresight into resilience. Learning is humanity's oldest survival skill. It's what turned uncertainty into innovation and risk into opportunity. To thrive in the age of AI, we need that same spirit of curiosity, a beginner's mindset that welcomes change and sees possibility where others see disruption. The system we build will mirror the mindset of their makers. Think about the people who are making AI right now. Open or closed, adaptive or rigid, transparent or opaque. And then that brings me to you. You're here because you chose to learn, to expand your understanding of a field that changes faster than certainty itself. That choice matters. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by change. It takes courage to engage with it. The fact that you're doing so, reading, exploring, growing, is the first and most important act of resilience. Because in a world where technology evolves faster than policy, curiosity is the most powerful security control we have. The tools will the tools will keep getting smarter, the attacks will keep getting faster, but the advantage, the enduring human advantage, will always belong to those who keep learning. Man, my girl was writing to me. This was a book for me. Ah. Anywho, that's the end of chapter one. And again, I'm reading the AI Cybersecurity Handbook. I'm super excited for chapter two. If you got this far, Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something, or thank you for watching. I'm super excited again about chapter 2, and so I will see you in the next video. Later.